Hello Blade Riders, welcome to another episode of Dread Skates. I'm here in Alien Daddy's video dungeon with the Metroboard Phoenix, and today we're taking a look at this board, a board which really asks the question, is more always better? Well, we're going to find out together, but first let's get this board out on the roads, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the specs and features of this and what my overall thoughts are. Alright, let's hit it.
Their peace has been broken. They're getting nervous, jumpy about what might bump up against them as they round the next turn. This is what they're afraid of.
Most of the people do not realize how much control we have with our skateboard.
Alright, and now we're back in studio. Let's go over some of the more interesting features and specs of the Phoenix, starting with this. So quick scene change, because that got boring real fast, and I was sick. Here's what you need to know about the Phoenix. The ESC is a Maker X DB6, which can put out a combined 180 peak motor amps. The tires are 153 millimeters. The motors are 3,000 watts at 140 kV each, and that can bring the board up to a max speed of 38 miles per hour. The battery is a 16S4P Duck Battery Systems Molicell pack, which has 940 watt hours of power. And if you compare that to something like the Evolve Hayden, which clocks in about 691 watt hours. The remote is the standard and trusty Hoyt Puck standard controller with the thumbstick upgrade. And the standard charger charges at 10 amps and will completely top off the board in a little over 2 hours. The overall weight of the board is about 44 pounds, and the length end to end is just around 44 inches, including the grab handle. Trucks, they are of course carried over from the X22. These are those lovely anodized red CNC'd aluminum trucks with removable kingpins and fitted with Riptide Sports crank bushings. And moving back to the deck, it is of course fully carbon fiber and has zero flex. The quality of the deck itself is fairly high with very few blemishes and a clear weave pattern through the top finish. Hey kids, I noticed you made it this far in the video without liking and subscribing. Maybe thinking about doing that. Really helps the channel out and doesn't cost anything. Or you can tell me why I'm wrong about something down in the comments. That engagement also helps. Let's get on to some of the nitty-gritties about this board, starting with the charger itself. So interestingly enough, as I noted earlier, it is a 10 amp fast charger, so that is a lot of chooch coming out the other end of this thing. And it will charge your board relatively quickly. One of my kind of criticisms here is that I would like to see a slow charging option to drop it down to 2 or 5 amps like some chargers allow you to switch between for when you just want to charge normally. Always charging at a higher amperage is going to reduce the lifespan of the pack overall, and especially for riders in colder climates during the winter when they're storing their board and you just want to cycle it, this is a good option to have. But out of the box, having a premium high-end fast charger is not a bad include. What is fairly interesting though is the charging port. Love it or hate it, Metro has decided to put a fairly prodigious protrusion on what I'm calling the tactical hump here to accommodate what is a fairly non-standard connector in the world of PEVs. Now we've seen this a few times. This is actually a Klinko connector. And I believe they probably have done this because of the higher amperage / charging rate of this board. However, on the board itself, I would like to see them switch to a smaller surface mount connector like an XT90 or just a standard GX16 3-pin, which can also accommodate these voltages and amperage charging rate. Moving on from there, the overall quality and fit and finish of this board is of course spectacular. That is something Metro is known for, and the Phoenix is no exception. One of the other useful / interesting features of the Phoenix is the carry handle. Here again, we see a 3D printed component, which is a bit unfortunate. I would have loved to have seen them moved on from that to a CNC type component like we've seen with some other solutions. However, the handle itself is very robust and also doubles as a bash guard here, and is arguably one of the best features on any board I've seen in terms of portability. The Phoenix clocks in at 44 pounds, as mentioned, and that means that you are going to be hefting that quite a bit. Now, of course, the carry handle alleviates that a fair amount. However, when you are, say, getting on and off of a train or a bus, or anywhere where you have to pick the board up to move it, you are going to be feeling that weight. Also worth mentioning is the hill climbing ability. The answer to that question is yes. Yes, it can. Those dual 3000 watt motors are easily capable of tackling even the most challenging of climbs, and here in SF, on my daily commute, there are plenty of those. I'm happy to report that the board struggled very little with getting up even some of the more serious inclines in the area, at the expense of a little bit of range. Speaking of range, let's talk about that. So in my testing, I was getting about 25 miles average in the city, and I was pushing about 30 max locally. This is within Metro's spec. They do advertise 25 to 35 miles of range. And if you fit this board with urethane street wheels or stick with the smaller 153 millimeter wheels, your range is probably going to go up a little bit from there. That said, a lot of people have pointed out that for the price of this board, the range is fairly limiting. However, compared to most other boards in this category, I find it to be about average. And speaking of price, let's just peel that band-aid off now. Phoenix clocks in at $2,800. I believe it's around on sale right now for $2,890. And more confusingly, if you opt for the smaller wheel option, it goes up to $2,999, so can't quite explain that. However, there's no getting around the fact that this board is $3,000. And Metro, to their credit, is very upfront about this. They are not targeting the budget market. What they are looking to offer here is a very competitively premium product and everyday rider that's going to be very dependable and has good service and support, at least within the US and Canada, because that's another little interesting point here. Unfortunately, our European friends will not be able to get their hands on this because at this time, Metro does not ship internationally. And let's go back and talk about that beautiful carbon fiber deck for a moment. What Metro has gone and done is modified the top plate of the standard X board, or the X22, to accommodate this larger 16 S4P battery. And as a matter of fact, the entirety of the E-tray is now taken up by the battery. So now we are left with this little, what I'll call a tactical hump here, which houses all of the ESC, the charge ports, and the power button. The power button itself is fairly functional and also includes Hoyt's signature battery level indicator, which is a nice feature to have for like at a glance battery level, which is good because you won't be able to get that information from the standard Hoyt Puck remote. I'd like to point out that a lot of people have brought up that there is the potential to either depress the power button or just general concerns about kicking or breaking off the charge port. I will say in my own testing, neither of these issues really came up for me. If you are a more aggressive rider and find yourself changing your stance, particularly on your front foot often, you may have to be a little bit more diligent in your foot placement, especially if you have larger feet. However, myself, just coming in under a size 10 US, had zero problems with this. And as a matter of fact, even with my rear foot, I did not find myself catching anything on the rear charge port or coming anywhere near the power button. I actually had to be very deliberate in attempting to depress it to replicate some of the issues that people were talking about. I would not be overly concerned about that point. However, in future, if they could relocate those things or deepen the depression around the charging port to basically mitigate those potential issues entirely, I would love to see a revision like that, especially because there are now 2 open ports that have been plugged at either end of the board, which would be perfect for it. So let's talk about those for a moment. So as you may have noticed, Metro has, I don't want to say downgraded, but they have definitely done a feature reduction here, and that is the removal of the inbuilt headlights and taillights. I'm not super clear on what the reasoning for this was, but I believe it had something to do with not being able to get the remote to remotely turn them on. If I'm being honest, I don't really miss this feature, as I've always advocated that a handheld flashlight, even a cheap one, is going to operate 1,000 times better than any inbuilt solution. And now moving on to the top of the deck itself, one other thing I'd like to call out here is that they have also added some raised flares on top of the deck. I believe this is to accommodate cabling, and I did not find them uncomfortable. However, I did find my front foot being pushed out and over the front and lip of the board a little more consistently than I would like. All right, so let's talk about the main event here, the ride feel. Well, as you may have guessed, the Phoenix is essentially an X22 and then some, and that is how it rides. Very similarly to the X22, and I definitely recommend you check out that review as well if you want to get some comparison here in terms of specs wise. However, the actual riding experience is very deep, it's carvy, the board itself is very responsive in turning and extremely stable at higher speeds, mostly due in part to those Riptide crank bushings, which help a great deal here. I had no problems pinning the throttle up and getting up to speed, and this thing is an absolute demon on the streets when it comes to acceleration. And that's pretty much it. That is the Metroboard Phoenix. So overall thoughts, should you get one for yourself? Well, as always, I can't answer that question for you. I can only provide my insights and experiences to share with you to make an informed decision. However, the Phoenix does carry on the Metro's legacy of reliability and dependability, and offers a very sleek and compelling package, if at albeit a very premium price point. However, specs-wise, there is a lot of competition in the market right now in this space, especially when it comes to range and performance. But as always, that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And until next time, stay safe out there, Blade Riders. Peace.